Most people hear power and picture domination, someone steamrolling a meeting. And most people hear politics and picture manipulation, back-channel deals, favoritism, and someone playing games. But if we build on what we've already established, that coordination is the real work groups have to do, then power and politics aren't random add-ons to organizational life. They're often what coordination looks like when it happens under real constraints. I'm Professor Bailey. I have a Ph.D. in organizational communication, and this is Everyday Organizational Behavior. Today, we're asking, how do power and politics shape group coordination? Power is often less about personality and more about dependence. One of the cleanest ways to understand this comes from sociologist Richard Emerson in 1962. Emerson's argument is simple. Power isn't just something a person has. Power exists inside a relationship. If I depend on you more than you depend on me, you have more power in that relationship. Not because you're a villain or you're charismatic or something else, it's because the structure of dependence is uneven. So in organizations, a useful question isn't who's the most forceful person, it's where are the dependencies? Who controls access to information? Who owns the schedule? Who controls approvals? Who has the budget? Who can fast track a decision? Who has relationships across departments? Who can translate between groups when they're not understanding each other? When someone becomes that bridge for coordination, when other people can't move forward without them, that's dependence. And dependence creates power. That framing matters because it helps us stop moralizing what's often structural. Dependence is built into interdependence, hierarchy, and scarcity. Even in flat organizations, you have bottlenecks. Now, once you see power as dependence, politics starts to look different. Politics tends to increase when formal systems can't resolve coordination cleanly. This is where Jeffrey Pfeffer is a useful anchor. Pfeffer's basic point across decades of work is that organizations are not perfectly rational machines. They're places where people and groups make decisions under uncertainty with limited resource and often ambiguous goals. And when goals are ambiguous, performance is hard to evaluate, and resources are constrained, formal authority doesn't solve everything. People still have to get work done, so coordination happens through influence. That influence can look like coalition building, pre-meetings, relationship management, timing, framing, careful positioning. It can look like getting buy-in before an idea is formally presented. It can look like aligning your project with whatever leadership is currently prioritizing. This isn't automatically shady. It can be functional. It's one way people coordinate when the formal system doesn't provide enough clarity, alignment, or resources to support the work being asked of them. This is why office politics often feel exhausting, because it's just coordination work. Only it's not the kind that shows up in your job description. And here's another helpful layer. Textbooks often teach power as a set of categories, and while that can feel a little bit like listy, it gives us vocabulary to work with. People influence coordination through these multiple bases of power, not just their job title. A really classic model here comes from social psychologists John French and Bertram Raven in 1959. They describe different bases of power, like legitimate power, expert power, and reward power. And you don't necessarily have to memorize that whole taxonomy for these purposes, but the key is that people become influential through different kinds of dependence. If others depend on your expertise, you have leverage. If they depend on your approval, you have leverage. If they depend on you for access to resources or opportunities, again, leverage. If they depend on your relationships or your credibility, leverage. So power doesn't always sit where the organizational chart says it sits. Sometimes power sits with the person who controls the workflow, the information, the interpretation, or the timing of things. Power and politics shape coordination by shaping what becomes visible, legitimate, and resourced. Coordination problems exist everywhere, but not all coordination problems get treated equally. Power influences what problems get attention, power influences those interpretations and which become the official story, and power influences which issues get funded, staffed, and prioritized. Power influences which deadlines becomes everyone's deadlines. That's why one group's small issue becomes urgent while another group's major breakdown gets normalized. And once you can see power and politics as coordination dynamics, our questions start to change. Where are the dependencies? Who are the bridges? bridges? Where is uncertainty making influence more necessary? Where is scarcity forcing us to make trade-offs? Where are goals ambiguous enough that framing and timing really matters? So to summarize, power is often rooted in dependence. Politics often rises when uncertainty and scarcity make formal systems insufficient, and influence can travel through these multiple bases of power. And that's the bridge to our next video. When coordination is shaped by uneven power, competing priorities, and constrained resources, conflict becomes more likely, not because people are bad, but because systems create incompatible demands.